Hi everyone and welcome back. Today is quite a special day because the DAC everybody waited for is finally released, and I'm listening to it for more than a week now, and I'm happy to deliver a world first review for the Gustard R30, their top of the line R2R ladder DAC that spots a quad mono design, a fully discrete output stage, a redesigned clocking system and a brand new streaming module with little to no compromises along the signal path. It currently sells for $3,600 or 3,600 euros here locally. I have a lot to share with you guys, including a must-watch comparison with the Gustard R26 and Denafrips Venus 15th. So grab yourself a snack and a drink and let's go ahead with this review. Compared to R26, their top dog is now heavier, it's meaner, and frankly, it's intimidating. We have a much beefier unit looking more serious and refined at the same time. And yes, it's the same case we already saw on the X30. The only difference is a slight rounding of the Gustard logo as opposed to a sharp triangle found on the X30. On the front panel we have just one single physical button in the shape of the Gustard logo and of course a massive monochrome display with touch controls that was blessed with a user-friendly UI. I like the zigzag pattern on its sides and also like the subtle openings that will move the hot air outside its case. Please don't ask me how, but this monster of a DAC is now cooler compared to its predecessor R26, and on average I measured a lower temperature by 8 degrees Celsius on the R30, so all those components are working at a cooler temperature, meaning a longer service life. The metal work seems flawless and its case is thicker compared to what tapping or SMSL have achieved so far, and I'm pretty confident that it will block most of the wireless interference. Overall, I'd say that we have a much beefier unit compared to its predecessor, and it's very much on par with the footprint of my Rockna Wavedream reference and also Denafrips Venus 15th. It's not as deep, but the overall size is pretty similar. Its weight went up to 10 kilos, and that shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone because we have a quad mono design as opposed to a dual module design on the R26. The only thing I dislike about it is this plasticky and ugly remote control that has nothing to do with a $3,600 unit, so just throw it in the trash bin and let's hope that Gustard makes a much better one at an extra expense. Once powered, the monochrome OLED screen will light up and 3 touch buttons will pop out of nowhere. You can see the volume controls on the right, including a settings icon in between that will engage the user menu once touched. It cannot get much simpler than this, and the cherry on top is a user-friendly UI. Taking a look at its back, you'll be surprised by how many digital inputs are being offered, but before powering on the unit, please make sure that both switches are showing the correct AC voltage, 115 volts or 230 volts, as these two are connected directly to the linear transformers found inside its case. Checking out the digital inputs, R30 has all of them, including 2 I2S inputs and an Ethernet input that will unlock the internal Rune bridge in case you already have a Rune server installed. The usual RCA and XLR outputs are also there, of course, and you can have them fixed or not, depending on the settings, meaning that you can use it as a DAC or as a DAC and passive preamp if you wish. There is one thing that stands out when checking out its specs, and that's the output impedance of both its RCA and XLR outputs, sitting at just 100 ohms, ensuring a much better handshake with integrated or power amplifiers that follow. Under its hood is where most of its magic happens, and as you already guessed, this is not a chip-based Delta Sigma DAC that uses off-the-shelf DAC chips, but this is a proper R2R ladder DAC that uses hundreds of resistors that form resistor networks, also called as ladders, that will decode zeros and ones into analog signals. Compared to a dual stereo module design of the R26, we now have a quad mono design on the R30. And if you follow the signal path, then you can see 4 independent paths that don't interfere that much except at the input stage. These are the brand new 27-bit R2R modules that deliver a higher dynamic range and a lower distortion compared to their previous design. From a dynamic range of 115 dB on R26, we now have a dynamic range of 123 dB on the R30, and since the harmonic distortion was halved versus its predecessor, we can now expect a clearer sound and also a blacker background compared to what we already have on the R26. Gustard also calls it discrete because we do not have any kind of integrated circuits or op-amps. Everything you see in there was crafted from discrete components only, such as resistors, diodes, inductors, coils, and so on. The R2R modules are encapsulated, and you can see thick metal plates on top of the ladders that have double duties, shielding them against wireless interference while lowering the working temperature. The digital filter also appears to be encapsulated, a feature that Gustard has never employed before. The impressive clocking system of the X30 found its way into the R30 is that gray bombastic thingy on its logic board. This is an oven-controlled crystal oscillator that can be usually found in much costlier DAC converters. Its timing, however, is controlled by a brand new custom-made synthesizer that I have never seen before on their previous units. Besides the DA conversion, the analog output stage is as important, and unfortunately many DAC builders are overlooking this part. Usually when you see something like 2 or 4 op-amps, then expect a boring or just a flat sound, and when you see almost like an amplifier in there, then clearly the sound will be much more engaging, much more powerful, and that's exactly what we have on the R30. Actually, about 1/2 of the entire PCB space is occupied by the analog output stage and its relay-based volume control, so this is definitely an overkill output stage by my standards. Last but not least, it seems that we have a brand new network bridge system, or in layman's terms, we have a brand new wired streamer, and once you connect an Ethernet cable to it and tap r30.local in your PC or Mac browser, then you'll be able to control all of its streaming options. You can even upgrade its firmware from there. At the moment, this web-based interface doesn't look as polished as I would like. It works as intended, but a few minor language barriers hold it back from looking perfect. I do expect a much more polished interface in the near future. Everything should be as clear by now, so let's hit some eardrums and let's check its sound. One of my close friends came over for a listen just a few days ago. I follow with a few gin tonics to improve our mood and also our focusing skills. And a few moments later, I just raised my hand to check my watch, and it's 2 AM in the morning. We couldn't believe it because all of these hours passed like minutes, but clearly this R30 has an effect on you. It just compels you to add more music into the playlist. My friend goes home, but I'm grabbing the R30, I'm running with it into my office. I connect it to my Cain Soul 170 HA headphone amplifier, and with the Hype-1 Susbar unveiled, I'm starting listening to music until I see the sun rising into the window. So clearly it has this effect on you. It's not trying to impress you in any way, but at the same time everything sounds so real and so effortless without trying so hard to impress you. The first thing that I observed when comparing this, just briefly, with the R26 is that the blackness in between the notes is now even blacker on the R30, and for a few seconds you might feel that the R30 is not powered on at all, because the space in between the notes is simply just pure silence. The second thing that you'll observe just immediately again after comparing these two is that we have lots and lots of additional resolution, micro detail information happening on the micro scale, and it's not the type of a resolution that is sharp, that is drawing your full attention. I believe this is a very different kind of resolution because it swaps that extreme sharpness and extreme leading edge with sheer realism that you can hear basically on world-class converters, unfortunately. For example, a piano note should carry some weight and it should have a longer reverb and echo because the piano note is actually hitting the piano body and then you can hear it. Something that lots of entry-level Delta Sigma converters are not rendering so natural, but R30 is doing it so easily. It's rendered as if Vivaldi was resurrected to play one last time in front of you. Listening to music on R30 becomes something else. It's more like a dirty pleasure and you're wondering only about what's coming next, what or how your next track will sound. The added resolution and inner detail texture never for a second made me feel that I had more rattle up top or sharper edges or stronger unnatural leading edges. I believe that it put more sounds all around me, but without making me uncomfortable about it. It's almost like comparing a full-frame camera with a cropped sensor camera, and even if you have the same 60 megapixel picture, on the full-frame camera you have simply more inner detail, a little bit more texture, the colors are popping a little bit nicer, you have that depth that is much nicer on the full frame, and overall we have a higher dynamic range, and that's what I'm basically getting when comparing the R30 with the R26. Unfortunately, not as many DAC builders are putting a high emphasis on the output stage, on the quality of their output stage. Some of these guys believe that 2 op-amps or 4 op-amps at the output stage is more than enough to reach 12 volt output via RCA or 4 volt output via XLR, and that is true. However, music is never predictable. Music is unpredictable, so it's not a square wave, it's not a sine wave. Music is unpredictable, and sometimes the signals go up by 1000 times when you have those dynamic peaks, when the bass goes, instantly is exploding. Something that an op-amp simply cannot do. It doesn't have the speed nor the bandwidth to do it. So if you want to have amazing dynamics and just preserve dynamic range, you need to build an overkill output stage, and that's exactly what Gustard has done with the R30. Actually, half of its PCB space is occupied by the output stage and volume control, something that I didn't see on any other DAC up to $6,000 US. If you know, please show me, maybe I'm wrong, but I do not know one single DAC that has such a beefy output stage, and that already tells me or suggests me a few things. R30 pounds really hard in the lowest octaves, and if you like bass slam or powerful dynamics and everything that has to do with dynamics, then this is a very good DAC, and it's quite close to my reference DAC, which is a lot more expensive. It's not really a Rockna Wave Dream, but a mini Rockna Wave Dream, yeah, you can say that it's very similar in this regard in terms of dynamics and how powerful it can be in this regard. Dynamics are easily the second most impressive thing that you'll realize and you'll observe on the R30 compared to many other DACs that I have tried at this exact price point. It's definitely going wild in this region. It's physical, it's hard slamming, it's hard pounding, call it as you want, but it definitely has these qualities. And of course, it's taking a 180-degree turn. It's transforming into a pouring kitten. If you are listening to some slow or mellow music, it's no longer showing its mean and hard pounding attitude. So yes, it changes from fast and impactful to slow and mellow, depending on the music, something that, frankly, not a lot of converters can do so easily. So don't worry if you don't listen to electronica or rock, because it's not getting aggressive. You will, however, feel its fighting stance once a big drum appears out of nowhere. Even a simple cello will sound as if the chords are somewhat thicker. When you combine a lower noise floor, a lower distortion, a high dynamic range, fast transients, a nicer detail retrieval, and all those low intensity notes no longer linger in the shadows but appear out of nowhere all around your room, then undeniably the soundstage and stereo separation is improving considerably. On the R26 you can already feel that it places the notes in individual air bubbles, but it seems that R26 is adding some additional void spaces in between the notes, and everything is just more open and more vast sounding on the R30. With the R30 you no longer just look to your right or to your left when listening to music like most Delta Sigma DACs do, but you look at your music in a 3D field, and sometimes you get this idea that the music is coming from the outer borders of your room, like behind my TV type of sound. I know it sounds wild, it sounds crazy, but that's how I feel when I'm listening to music on the R30. And I'm 100% sure that when it comes to 3D effects, holography, soundstage, nothing does it better than a proper R2R ladder DAC followed by a very good 1-bit FPGA DAC and then by everything else. And there's another unique trait on the R30, the way it lets you focus and follow the trail of a note, the inception point, its sustain, and also its decay. It does it so naturally and so easily. You no longer need to close your eyes for that to happen, like it might happen on Delta Sigma DACs, for example. It does it so effortlessly. If you think about it, the decay is the way the sound paints the space where the recording was made. So simply close your eyes and you can feel a smaller or a bigger room, and it lets you see your music. You will clearly imagine the piano placement, where is the bassist and where the soloist and backing vocals are. If somebody works around during the recording process, then there's a person walking around your listening spot. It's almost like echolocation that dolphins and whales use to see the dangers ahead and the depths. It's a similar effect, with the exception that the sound itself paints this picture with the power of your imagination. Unlocking its wired streamer is super easy. Just plug in an Ethernet cable, tap on the settings buttons a couple of times until the streamer will be displayed on the screen. Go to your PC or Mac that's connected to the same network as R30 and type r30.local in your browser, and just like that, a simplified interface lets you enable or disable its renderers such as Apple's AirPlay, RuneBridge, UPnP DLNA, and HQ Player NNA, or Spotify Connect. I will never use Spotify, I'm sorry, because that's a lossy-only platform. Yes, those are MP3s, but you can try Apple's AirPlay that works flawlessly, but unfortunately that is not a 100% lossless platform again. So you can use AirPlay mostly for convenience, but if you want to have maximum performance, then use it via Rune, via UPnP or DLNA or HQ Player NNA. I used it mostly as a Rune endpoint together with my Rockna WaveDreamNet Rune server, and that's how like 99% of this review was made, because it sounds absolutely fantastic as a Rune endpoint. Perhaps what will surprise a lot of you is that the internal Rune endpoint of the R30 was not lagging behind so hard versus a Rockna WaveDreamNet that can also function as a Rune endpoint, and in this regard it sounded very similar to an Eversolo DMP-A8 or DMP-A10. And considering how clear and tight it already sounds via Rune acting as a bridge, honestly I see no reason to invest in a separate Rune bridge, because it already works very well as one, given that you already have a Rune server installed somewhere around the house. Instead of Spotify Connect, I would love to see Tidal Connect, or better yet Qobuz Connect, which I believe would sound considerably better. And this is a missed opportunity on Gustard, and I hope they will add these two, Tidal Connect and Qobuz Connect, via a firmware upgrade. That will be absolutely fantastic, I believe. Okay guys, let's do some short comparisons with the R26 and also with the Denafrips Venus 15th that I've been using for quite some time. I won't discuss their features or their build quality, but I will just mention that both R30 and also R26 have a passive volume control, so you can use them as passive preamplifiers, and they also have a somewhat limited streaming capabilities, something that the Denafrips does not have. Sound-wise, after conducting double blind tests over the course of 2 days, I have drawn my conclusions. The Denafrips Venus seems to overexcite the mid-bass region, and sometimes it sounds a little boomier in here, so it's adding a little bit of quantity in here, more than what I would call as neutral, at the cost of adding a little of smearing in the bass region. So quantity-wise it's a lot, but quality is going a little bit down compared to both R26 and R30. The R30 offers a clearer bottom end while providing truer to life bass rendition. So I believe that the boominess effects are gone on the R30 while showing an extra layer of information, sounding ever so slightly clearer and purer in a way. The R26 has an identical tonality with the R30, with the exception that there is a little bit less information in the bass, mid-range and treble. It's not as clear, it's not as defined, and it's not as detailed. In crowded passages, R26 maintained a great posture, still decompressing the music for a relaxed listen, but the other two did that better, showing some additional nuances at every step. The mid-range region was another revelation, and as I have mentioned already in my Denafrips Venus 15 review, it will impress you mostly with an amazing bass performance, with a very good treble extension, but not that much with a seductive or sweet sounding mid-range. I'm sorry, but it's not super impressive in the mid-range. Something that I'm getting from both R30 and R26 that are seductive, sweet, organic and lush and very rich sounding in the mid-range region. You might say that even the mid-range is a little bit forward sounding on both Gustards and not so much on the Denafrips that is pushing back the mid-range. Everything that has to do with it, string-based instruments, vocals, everything is just pushed a little bit back on the Denafrips. Both R26 and R30 shown a little bit more emotion in here, with every guitar whip, with every piano stroke. Even male and female voices had a little bit more emotion attached to them. The whole treble region was also an eye-opening experience, and I believe this is where R26 is losing lots of ground. It slightly rolls off past 16 kHz some information, so there is less things happening in the background. It does it gently, it does it naturally, it's not bothering you at all, but it's a sweet lie at the end of the day because some information is missing from that region. The R30 by comparison has more inner detail, more texture, it's more information in there in the upper treble, but it does that without adding any kind of sharpness or listening fatigue. At first, the Venus appeared clearer sounding because it had clearer contour of the notes, but as I was adding more music, I just realized that it's not as ultra fast and it's not as time aligned like R30, and when listening to double drums or fast cymbals or some snares, it adds some post-ringing artifacts and it sounds a little bit mushy. But mind you, if I would not compare it with the R30, I would never call it artificial or mushy sounding in the upper treble. When discussing dynamics, it was a tie between the R30 and also the Venus. Venus adds a little bit more mid-bass presence, it sounds a little bit boomy in here, while R30 adds lots of sub-bass energy without becoming boomy and sounding a little bit clearer in the bass. But both of these are very dynamic sounding and very punchy sounding, something that R26 is also quite impressive in here, but not exactly on the same level. It's not as visceral and it's not as explosive like both R30 and the Venus. I would say that the only region where the Venus was ruling supreme was soundstage, imaging, depth, and just overall 3D effects. It was by a hair bigger sounding compared to the R30. The R30 was not lagging much behind, but perhaps due to a purer mid-bass rendition, there is less mid-bass energy wandering around the room, and maybe that makes me think there is a bit less music in every corner of the room. Except for having a similar flow and naturalness, I believe that R30 outperformed the R26 in every metric possible. That's something that everybody expected, but sounding very similar with the Denafrips Venus 15th in a few areas and outperforming it in a few other key areas, it's something that not even I expected to get. I have complained many times by now about Gustard as a brand. I was the one who banned mini CDs from the entire DAC portfolio, and you can now download the drivers from their official webpage if you are brave enough to browse through their official webpage. I'm still fighting against one of the ugliest hi-fi websites I've came across. It's a poorly translated page at best, and it can be your worst nightmare, especially if you expect to find meaningful information, and that's why I recommend buying from their authorized dealers. Did I already mention that a plasticky remote control for a $3,600 unit is a big no-no? It needs to change, and it needs to change now, and I'm willing to wait. And except for these two drawbacks that I just mentioned and the fact that we do not have Tidal Connect and Qobuz Connect, I believe that this was a flawless sounding unit. It was much better compared to its predecessor, and it's held its own versus a pricier R2R ladder DAC, and I believe that it's definitely up there with some of the best units that I have ever tried, and that's why it deserves my highly impressive award. Before you go, don't forget to check out my Overkill R30 review that I left below, which contains extra bits of information and some additional sound impressions. And as usual, leave a like, a dislike, maybe subscribe to the channel if you found this video helpful, and I'll see you next week with what I believe is the very best wired and wireless streamer that ever Solo ever did. See you soon. Cheers.